So when we were planning this session together, the three of us were talking, and we were like, how are we going to go tell everybody that we want to talk about the new SSMS without telling everybody we want to talk about the new SSMS? So we had this challenge, right? This is why you see the title and the abstract, what it looks like. So we knew that we were going to be launching this at the keynote, including the new SSMS 21 and Copilot. Now, despite what you saw this morning, I don't think there was actually really a fair fight that actually happened. I agreed to be with Aaron and Anna in this session as well. It's my pleasure to actually do that. So I'm Bob Ward, a principal architect at Microsoft. Thank you so much. Getting kind of late in the day. I know your brain's starting to kind of fry and melt. If you were in my last session, you're probably really already truly melted after that one. So this is going to be a lot of fun, though. Can't wait to go see what we're going to go talk about today. So first of all, I'd like the folks on stage to introduce themselves a little bit, what you do to make sure they know, and then we'll talk about some logistics for the session. Aaron?
I'm Erin Stellato. I am the program manager for SSMS and also for Copilot in SSMS.
I'm Anna Hoffman. I'm the GPM for the tools, SQL tools, which includes SSMS and some other tools that you might work with, as well as a couple experiences that we're working on.
Awesome. A couple logistics for you. So we definitely want your questions. I totally know you're going to ask a lot of questions. But here's some ground rules for us, if you don't mind, right? Number one, we're going to be focusing on the new version of SSMS that we launched today, SSMS 21 and Copilot. We'd love to focus your questions on that, on what you're going to see today about what's new, what's out there, especially in these Copilot experiences. I know you're so passionate about SSMS, and Aaron would like to love and hear about all the amazing things you want SSMS to do. But let's not focus on that in today's session and use the links that she's going to provide in the session about where you can give that feedback. But Aaron's also, and Anna, going to be here at the conference. If you have other feedback to give them about SSMS in general, you can certainly do that. Other thing is, too, I know you're passionate and you're going to see something like, hey, I got a question. We're going to pick some known places in the actual talk itself to kind of pause and say, hey, what kind of questions do you have? Aaron loves to answer questions. So I told her, I said, we're going to do this, but I'm going to kind of time bound you a little bit here to make sure we just can still get through all the content. So kind of keeping those logistics in mind as we kind of go through it. We think you're going to love what you're going to see. And here today, it's going to be more of a deeper dive than what you saw today in the keynote. So with that, I'd like to turn to Anna, because you said to me in the keynote today, hey, Bob, I run the tools and experiences team, like this. So why don't you tell us what all that means?
For the record, I didn't want to say that. I said that does
You
not
didn't
sound
want to say that.
like a very humble thing to
Oh, okay.
It's my idea that she said because she does,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
But yeah, so when we talk about SQL tools, you might be wondering, like, what is that? And I, pass it back to you and say, when you think about your SQL toolbox, what are some of the things that entails? And if you're in this session and you enjoyed the session this morning, SSMS is probably one of your big tools. But we have other tools that we support for you to do SQL things with, like data tools in Visual Studio, the MS SQL extension in VS Code, Azure Data Studio, and the Azure Portal. This is an area that our overall team owns as well, and this is a key experience when we think about experiences. Then there are some other tools that maybe you work with more or maybe you work with less, but we use under the hood. Things like DACFX and SQL package, things like the SQL Server PowerShell module, SQL command and GoSQL command, SQL projects, and the Microsoft build.sql library, and then Copilot. So we're working on a couple of things in the Copilot space. But today, I highlighted in purple SSMS and Copilot because that's really what we're going to be focusing on today. But definitely think about your other tools that you have in your SQL toolbox and how, as you go through this session, how you might use this to work with that. We're definitely looking for feedback. And one other thing before we get into it, we do have some shirts both for SSMS and for Data Exposed at the end.
Oh, swag at the end.
And we'll stay for questions.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, because there's no session after this, so Aaron got ideas that we could just go until
we just
6.
Keep going.
Because that's when your next thing is, if you want to sit in here for 2 hours. But yeah, so with that, I'll pass over to Aaron to talk a little bit about SSMS 21 and the journey.
All right. So the first question I should answer is, when is it going to be available, right? Because I think there was a little bit of confusion during the keynote this morning with exactly kind of how it was announced. And we're announcing SSMS 21 preview. It is not available yet, so if you've been clicking on the download page waiting for that to refresh, I apologize for any confusion and wasted time on your part trying to get on the Wi-Fi. It will be available soon. And I recognize that's very ambiguous, and it's difficult for me to give you a date because if it changes, then all of a sudden you're like, Aaron, it was supposed to be there and it's not, and that's really frustrating. So very rarely do we ever give a date. And the other thing is that prior to 21, we had complete control, truly, over when we released SSMS. And now that we are up to date with Visual Studio 2022, that has changed. We will be releasing more in line with when Visual Studio releases. Now, if you know anything about that, do any of you use Visual Studio? Just show of hands. Great. So you know that they just came out with 17.11, I think it was, right? Back in August, and they had 17.10 in May. And typically they release once a quarter. So if they released in May and they release in August, then they'll probably release in November, which means they will release this month, which means it will be soon. So that's the best that I can do. I appreciate your patience. And in terms of Management Studio 21, this lovely icon that you all know and love, right, has gotten an update, which I'm so excited about. This is the original icon for SSMS. So it was originally released in 2005. How many people, show of hands, have been using SSMS since 2005? Yep, same. Okay, so this is the icon that we started with, and I went to design and I'm like, you know what? There's a lot happening here. I really want something new for us, something that's more modern so that we don't look like the redheaded stepchild that's just kind of stuck in the corner. So I gave them some words and some colors, and I said, you know, SSMS kind of does everything, right? It's all-encompassing. It is the one-stop shop that everybody uses. It does everything that we need. So they pulled the tools icon out of there, right? So still staying with the tools. And then kind of simplified that down to just crossbars, kind of like beams crossing, right? Strong. And then angled that just a tiny little bit, and then wrapping around to make it kind of all-encompassing. And then you think about the database icon, and we end up with this new icon for SSMS 21. So this came really late in the game after we printed the shirts. So I tell y'all, it's been a lot. So there are stickers. There are stickers down in the booth for the new icon. Best that I could do. So with SSMS 21, there's a lot of things that we get, as we've said multiple times, based on Visual Studio 2022, which also means, whether you realize that or not, it will be installed using the Visual Studio installer, right? Visual Studio installer, Visual Studio, two separate applications. And I'm making some of these things really clear because when I've done some internal presentations leading up to this, there's been some confusion, and I want to make sure that all of you are on the right page to start. So you will no longer be downloading the 600 meg file when you want to install 21 or even when you want to update. You're going to download what is basically the bootstrapper to get Visual Studio installed, and then you're going to go ahead and install SSMS using that. This means, of course, with Visual Studio that we now get to 64-bit, which a lot of folks have been asking for. So right here, we're hitting things that the community has requested for a long, long time. Modern installation, updates within the application, 64-bit, why aren't you on the latest Visual Studio? Knocked all those out with this line. Awesome, thank you. We also are bringing back Git. Oh, wait, because somebody's got to be excited about that. There's people that have upvoted that, right? Pretty happy to see it. This lends itself to us eventually bringing SQL project support to Management Studio. Cannot give a date as to when. Again, there's a lot that we're doing, and hopefully you all are starting to recognize that. We've basically rebuilt SSMS. So Git is available in 21. And then there's a bunch of query editor improvements that you saw this morning. So vertical tabs, that was another huge request from folks. That is now available. You can also actually set the width of those tabs, like how wide or how narrow do you want them to be. You can color them based on the project, based on the extension. And then we're also trying to do better with the parity between what we have in SQL Server and what we have with Azure. So longstanding complaint is that when I wanted to create a user or a login in Azure SQL database, it would just give me the T-SQL script, right? I would really like the UI for that. So we now have the UI for both of those. Still some work that needs to be done there, but that's available within Preview 1. So this is all stuff that's mostly done, but at the bottom here, we start to get into things that we need, that we are going to continue to work on and bring into subsequent previews. Historically, we have had 1, 2, maybe 3 previews. We will have more. I can't tell you exactly how many. Again, not entirely within our control, but we will have more previews than we have had previously. The great thing is that this allows us to iterate faster, right? So for those of you who love to get on previews, thank you. Those of you that love to be on previews and also provide feedback, thank you, because that is what we want to hear. I really hope that it's evident that we are listening. I've heard a lot of folks over the past year or two say, what is Microsoft doing with SSMS? Like, nothing's happening here. I don't see anything. And I have both Bob and Anna, quite honestly, to thank for helping to get that ball moving and supporting it to get us to where we are here today. So I hope at this point folks recognize that we are truly invested in SSMS and its future. We will be bringing improved Azure authentication into SSMS. So we're going to grab the Visual Studio code that they use for that auth and pull that into SSMS. What we have had is a little bit antiquated, so this will bring us up to date. We will also continue to support extensions. So what you have seen, what we have already in SSMS 20, right? We know that some third-party companies and some independent folks have extensions within SSMS. Initially, we will support that exact same thing. Long term, what we will have is the ability to go to the extensions menu within SSMS and then browse to find more. And we will also eventually have a place on the Visual Studio Marketplace with a little thing just for SSMS at some point. Again, it takes a village. It's a very big village. It includes the Visual Studio team at this point, right? I've gotten to know a lot of those folks really well. And that work, bringing full support for extensions, is going to take time. Many, many months. I'll say it that way. But it's on my list. It's very high on my list of things that I want us to do. We're also going to bring a new connection experience. I had really hoped this would be ready for Preview 1, but we're a little bit behind. So I'm hoping that we've got some start by Preview 2. May not appear until after that. But I've heard tons of feedback that database, when we connect to Azure SQL, right? I want to be able to go select the database without hopping to another tab and finding it. So we'll bring that database option to the front screen, along with everything else we still have up there, as well as add a connection string. So we'll generate the connection string, or you can drop a connection string in there, and then it will populate the rest of the fields there. That's been another huge request. I'm also hoping we'll have room on that pane for application intent read-only, right? That's another one that you'll have to go and type in. We want to try to limit the typing that you have to do there. So stay tuned as that dialogue continues to evolve. And then, of course, the beginnings of Dark Theme, as you saw this morning. Now, I had to lie to a lot of people for the past several weeks because I really didn't want that to get out before this morning's keynote. To the MVPs who were in the session on Monday, I'm really sorry because I lied to you too. It was only a few weeks ago that we kind of let it be known internally. We even kept Sharish in the dark until last week because I thought it was a really fun surprise for folks because I get asked about it every time I present, every time there's a blog post, almost every time there's a LinkedIn post. Now, why has it taken so long for dark mode, right? That's a question that a lot of folks were like, this should be really easy. Well, it's not, because SQL Server Management Studio was originally released in 2005. And at that time, Visual Studio did not have support for dark mode. And so if you've ever looked at Visual Studio, and then you go look at SSMS, you can see the similarities, but then all of those dialogues within SSMS, right? Object Explorer, the grid results, right-click database properties, right-click server properties, right-click create new user, create new procedure, all of that is code that was created in the very beginning, the majority of it. And so when Visual Studio introduced dark mode, there was no magic switch that we could flick to make all of those dialogues support dark theme. We have to go back to every single one. And so for a long time, that really felt prohibitive. And so I said to engineering, can you tell me what it would cost? Can you help me understand what would it take for us to really add dark mode? And so they came back and they said, here's what it would be. And I said, okay, well, we can't obviously stop and just work on dark mode. And I don't think that we can continue ignoring this. I think there's valid reasons for having it. Full disclosure, I don't like dark mode, all right? I'm doing this for all of you. And so is there something else we could do? And there was a suggestion in the community. Why can't you start and just add it over time? So I said, engineering, why can't we just start and add it over time? And they said, we can do that. So that's what we're doing, right? So when you download Preview 1 and you open it up, you will see that Object Explorer, Template Explorer, Query Editor, the results grid, a few other things have dark mode to start with. But there's a lot of dialogues that don't. There's a lot of places where there's dark mode and you might right-click and you're like, that doesn't look right. It's going to take time. So I'm going to ask for your patience and I'm going to ask for your help in letting us know if you find those issues that we might have missed, and also what are the most important dialogues for us to tackle next, right? I have an idea based on the telemetry, like where you spend your time, but I always want to hear that feedback so that we're trending in the right direction. We will also start to work on support for ARM64. This is a complicated thing for us to sort out, but I have the utmost confidence in our engineering team, and there's one of our engineers who's actually really excited to work on this. I kind of think he's crazy, but he's really looking forward to it. So again, I don't have a time frame on when, but this will come. And then of course, we also have Copilot, which we mentioned this morning, and we definitely are going to talk more about here. And I want to just bring up the feedback site, because I say this a lot, but I don't know that you all read my blog posts or that you all look at LinkedIn. But the SQL feedback site is where we collect all of the feedback for SSMS right now. And it is aka.ms//SQL feedback. If you haven't been there, go check it out. My request is that when you run into issues, that's where I need everything to go. Because if you email me, that's great, but if you're emailing me a request, I don't know what priority that has compared to everybody else, right? There's millions of people who use SSMS. And I understand that you all love how you use it and you want to use it in a certain way, but I have to have some way of deciding where to start. And so these feedback items and the votes and the comments, those are the currency, right? That helps me understand what the greater community wants to see. So before you create anything, please search, because there's a lot of stuff out there. And so when you go to that site, down at the bottom, there is a filter. And if you go to See All, because of course tools alphabetically is way at the bottom, and then you select tooling, that will reduce the result set to only the feedback items that are specific to tools. The majority of them are for SSMS. Be creative in your searching, right? Not everybody might describe the issue the way you do. If you find it, upvote it. If you don't, create a new one. Tell your friends, right? Several of you in here are really good about logging in those issues and then sharing it and saying, hey, go vote. So that's what I really need from folks. Okay, installing SSMS. This, I think, is going to be more tricky than I originally anticipated for people to truly understand. This is the icon for the Visual Studio installer. Okay, so I know it looks like Visual Studio, but it's got the arrow, so that's the Visual Studio installer. That's a 32-bit application, just as an aside. When you want to install Visual Studio, you can do that with the Visual Studio installer. When you want to install SSMS, you use the exact same installer to install SSMS. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to have Visual Studio installed in order to install SSMS. It doesn't mean that when you install SSMS, it will also install Visual Studio, right? These are three separate applications here. So a little bit of a peek of what the installer looks like now with SSMS, right? I've got Visual Studio 2022 installed. I also here have a near final release of 21 installed with the installer. And then you can see it's got an update available, and so when I get more information about the update, it can tell me, hey, here's what you need to change. So for those of you that asked for modern installer, application updates right within the app, here you go, right? You'll get a notification when that occurs. So I like pictures a lot. So I can have a machine that just has Visual Studio. I can have a machine that just has SSMS. I can have Visual Studio on my machine and then install SSMS. I can have SSMS and then install Visual Studio. Clear? Good? Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So I'm going to, I have all these on slides, but sometimes it's just kind of more fun to take a look, right, at what's going on. So I went through some things really quickly this morning related to 21. So let me just open that up. Just a quick tour, and then we'll hop over to Copilot. So you saw that I had the vertical tabs, and this window right here gives us the ability to change how I want things. This is also within Tools Options. So within Tools Options, you have the tabs window. Now I'm going to go in here, and now I'm going to be lost because I can't remember exactly where it is. Here it is, right? And there's a whole bunch of things that didn't used to exist before. So this is one of the things that I think you all should check out because you're going to be able to customize that view more than you have been. I love vertical tabs in Edge, but I'll be honest, this takes a little bit more real estate than I was prepared for. So just a little note there. In terms of the Azure auth, I'm going to show this example with Azure Storage. We haven't applied this across all of the Azure dialogues, but am I on the network? Uh-oh, this is the worst. There we go. Phew. So this doesn't maybe look that much different compared to 20, but I can add multiple accounts, which I wasn't able to easily do before. I can select my subscription, and then the storage account blob information reduces based on what I have selected. And specifically, you'll notice up here, I now have this little icon for myself, and if I go to my account settings, I have my Microsoft account added. I can add additional accounts here. I'm going to take a second to point out that anybody who's paying attention notices that right now this still says Manage Visual Studio Profile. It's a lot of work to rename strings, right? There's a lot of them all over the place. And we've tried to find every single one that we can, but I'm certain that we've missed a few. So if you see those, check to see if there's already a feedback item or if it's written as a known issue. But we are working to get those cleaned up across the entire system. Now this morning I also happened to start with Git. And so I'll be honest with you, it took me about an hour to get all this working so that I could show you this demo. I don't know Git, okay? But I know some of you do, and that's great. I figured out how to do a fetch, because I made a change in my repo or something like that. I don't know. But it worked this morning. It was great. Now I'm not, there we go. There's my fetch, right? And then I can go ahead and do, I think it's a pull. I don't remember. But this is here now. So for those of you who are into source control, hallelujah. Oh, look, I got a commit. It actually worked. I'm not the person to demo any more than that, but I do think that would be a really great session of Git for database administrators. So I'm going to learn, and we'll come back to that maybe next year. Okay, and then the other thing. Let me just come back to my slides real quick here. So that was the authentication. And then we also have the logins and users. I'm not connected to my Azure SQL database. So again, right-click New Login. You'll now have this dialog. If I right-click and say New User, we'll now have the user dialog. And, oh, I forgot to show database scoped configuration. Glenberry, you are welcome. You now have the ability to view those all in one spot, as well as change the values as well. And then the query editor improvements, and I'm just going through these because we kind of already looked at them within the UI. And again, the results grid now supports a different background for null. That was a huge request. I had no idea. But it's there now in query results, if that's your thing. And then the multiple tabs and windows options. Again, you can set the layout to be at the top, and if so, then you can sort them alphabetically. You can choose where the tabs go. You can show them in multiple rows or not. You can set the min and max width. You can colorize. You can do pinned tabs in a different row if you have your favorites that you always open. That really would have helped Bob this morning, right? For sure. Again, and you can set them right and left and how you want to order them there. Again, max width, colorize, etc. and then the results grid here. Again, this seems a little extreme to me, but knock yourself out. Okay, this is where I need to stop, set your timer, and see if there's any questions before I go on. Person way in the back has had a question multiple times. Yes?
It's the same question every time. Is there going to be an offline installer?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there going to be an offline installer? Yes. Essentially, anything that Visual Studio does with its installation, we can do now with SSMS. What's that? It's not you yet, but you can hang up here if you want. Okay, that's fine. In terms of the installation by the way, there's a lot of documentation that needs to be created, so I'm working on that. There's going to be a new folder that's called SSMS 21 where all the stuff is going to be. I'm starting with the installation documentation because I think that's what y'all are going to do first. But like, if you have questions about Git, for now you're going to need to go over to the Visual Studio documentation. I'm trying to find the right balance between rewriting everything and figuring out where to reroute you. So, yes?
Your slide said TFS in Git, so
It did say that.
so you are supporting TFS.
For now. Yes.
Is there a minimum version of each one of the engines that SSMS can connect to that you can connect to with 21?
That's a good question. Is there a minimum version of SSMS 21 for each of the different flavors of SQL that you can connect to? Technically, probably not. But I will say that the documentation will state that we're supporting, I think SQL Server 2012 is the oldest one that we will officially be supporting. So, but I know that there are those of you who are connecting to 2005 and even 2000 from SSMS. But
And do you know if that's also the case for integration services, analysis services?
so integration services, analysis services. So integration services, it's its own friendly bit. In that for right now, you still need to match the version. Meaning, if you're going to do, and it's just for like, I think it's the SSIS DB, right? Whenever you got DTS involved, right, old school DTS, you need to match the version. So if you're running SQL Server 2016, you have to use SSMS 16. But for 21, 20, and 19 will all connect to SQL Server 2022. I know that's a lot of fun. Okay, yes?
Is there going to be on the settings for SSMS a return to default? So let's say you
There is a return to default, yes. So if you mess up, yes, if you have made a horrible mistake and you open that up, you're like, oh no, thank you, there is a return to default. Yes, it will save you. Over there, yes. Question is, can you create notebooks? You cannot. So if you need to add screenshots or a video, I actually don't know if you can do that on the feedback site. I think that you can't add those right now, which is very unfortunate. So a video is really easier, but if you can't upload it, which I'm pretty sure you can't, you can either share a link to it if you're willing to do that, or you could email me directly, or you could describe the steps. Like the better you describe the steps, the better I can do at recreating it. So how am I doing on time, Bob? You do not need any subscription for SSMS. Has been, always will be a free tool, so you don't need to have any Visual Studio subscription at all. As Bob said, we're focusing on SSMS today, so we're going to stay with that. Glenn. So startup time is one of the things that we will get to. My goal, first of all, is let's get to where we were with 20. And then see what else we have time to improve. But improved startup time is on my list. I can't make any guarantees at this point. So yeah.
Are there any changes to create and manage distributed availability groups?
Are there any changes to distributed availability groups in terms of the support in the UI that doesn't exist that you all would love to have? No, not yet. But it's on my list, and I've talked to the availability group folks about this gap, and I would love to see us improve that. Yes?
Will we have to log in with a Microsoft account to run it?
Will you have to log in with a Microsoft account to run it? No. No. One more. Yes? This is a great segue. Thank you for asking that question. Let's talk about Copilot. So before we even talk about expectations, your question, is it bundled with SSMS, right? That's your question. Well, let's have a little fun. How many of you think that it is part of SSMS? How many of you think that it is not part of SSMS? Yeah, you all are right. Because the first round of you would be really upset, right? There's a lot of feedback. We don't want it as part of our installation. And I won't be able to install SSMS 21 if Copilot is part of it because my company will not allow that. Heard that message loud and clear. It will be an extension, okay? So when it becomes available in public preview for SSMS 21, it will be an extension that you install. So it is an opt-in, okay? It is not required. Oh, whoa. Hang on. You asked your question. I'm back, okay? All right. So we are at the very beginning of the Copilot journey. And I was using like this to describe it, and then I realized that I kind of like had to turn like to try to give you like this, and that wasn't going to work. So then I was like, well, just create a timeline. So we are over here on the left, right? November, that's where we are, 2024. We're talking about private preview. And then to be determined, right, when that is feature complete, and we are here. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Like, there's a lot. SSMS connects to SQL Server 2022, 2019, 2017, 2016, 2014, 2012, Azure SQL Database, Azure MI, right? And you can ask an infinite number of questions, right, to any one of those. Like, that's a lot of things that we kind of got to sort out to make sure that they're giving you a good response. So this is going to take time, but I'll be honest, it's been really, really fun so far. So we're being very deliberate and very intentional in what we do, where we start, and where we are going next. And the ultimate goal is to make it easier for you. And some of you might be in here and you might think, I don't need Copilot. And Bob is going to tell you that that is wrong, because even Bob benefits from using Copilot, not just from the example we used this morning. I'll be honest with you. When we started this journey with Copilot in the beginning, I was like, I understand that it's really popular and everybody loves it, but I don't really know how I'm going to use it. And it requires a shift in like how you do things. And the thing is Copilot's not going to replace anything that you do. It's going to help you do it faster. And so if you save 5 minutes here, you save a couple minutes here, like that adds up throughout the day, that adds up throughout your week. And so my suggestion is to think of it as a productivity enhancer, right? More than anything else. Now, a few principles, and if you've seen any of Joe or Bob's presentations about Copilot and Azure, these will be familiar. First of all, the responses are grounded in the database environment. And what that means is that Copilot and SSMS has context. It has context about your connection. It has context about your database. So it knows what version of SQL you're connected to, and it's going to tailor the answer accordingly. It also understands, it can find out information about your database, right? It can run queries to understand the objects in your database. One of the challenges with GitHub Copilot, if you've used that in Visual Studio or VS Code or Azure Data Studio, is that in order for you to have it help you write T-SQL, you have to have the object definitions in a query editor somewhere. And that's not something you're going to do, right? You just want to be able to go and type and write the query. And so Copilot and SSMS does that legwork for you, right? It will understand the schema. It only has access to what you have access to. It can only do what you have permissions to do. So if you say, go drop the database, it's not going to be able to drop the database because you don't have permissions to drop the database. So again, security always very important, right? With great power comes great responsibility. Use it wisely. And the general reminder, any prompt that you submit, any response that we get, we do not retain it. We don't store it anywhere. We don't use it to train or to retrain or to do anything with the models. I like you all, but I don't want to see your data. I don't want to know anything about your tables in your database, and neither does Microsoft. We are not keeping that information anywhere, and I will tell you that I've been working on this private preview for Copilot for way longer than I want to admit because there are a lot of security and privacy and legal things that have to be completed, more than I had any idea. So trust me when I say that we're not retaining any of that information. And then the architecture, because I'm sure that folks have questions about this. I've already gotten a few today. Copilot in SSMS is a retrieval augmented generated, so RAG-based semantic kernel implementation. And right now, the architecture is a bring your own endpoint, but we are restricting it currently to Azure OpenAI. So that doesn't mean that you can use Copilot in your environment and not access the internet yet. We have to start somewhere. And we're starting with an environment in Azure OpenAI that has multiple privacy and security things in place already. And it's, quite frankly, just easier for us to start building there and then eventually allow folks to do small language models, do everything internally. But for the time being, it uses Azure OpenAI endpoints and deployments there. And the cost of it, because that will probably be your next question, depends on the deployment, the quota, the model, and then how much you use it. So it's not a flat fee. It's basically you control the cost. It's completely in your hands. I don't have any good estimates yet, but I expect that by the time we get through private preview, I will have a better idea to say, if you've got this many users doing this kind of conversation or prompts, we estimate it's going to be about this. Obviously, it's just going to be an estimate. And so that is something that we will look to provide and to help folks understand moving forward. Okay, now you're up. I can take one or two quick questions. Oh, fast.
Role-based, can you stop people from using Copilot?
Can you stop people from using Copilot?
Or sysadmins have access to Copilot versus like somebody has to be a reader on a database that can't use it?
Okay, so you cannot set the permissions based on roles. We're not tying it to that at all. We're not tying that to, but if you don't want someone to use Copilot, then if you're deploying SSMS, you can set up the deployment like you can in Visual Studio, right, and have it only install certain things, so it could only install Copilot or not install Copilot. Okay, yeah.
As you bring your own endpoint to connect to the Copilot, are you limited to what language model you can use? And it specifically, is it going to be like defaulted to the Prometheus model, or is it going to be more of a GPT-4o?
So it's GPT-4o right now. We will have a recommended model. We obviously can't test against every single model that's out there, nor will we. So we'll have a recommendation, but ultimately you'll be able to choose your own. One more question. Yep.
Is there a privacy statement that we can point out lawyers to?
There is. Oh, sir. I have lots of privacy things. But yes, there's a privacy thing that you have to select when you start using it. And if you are using a resource within Azure OpenAI, there's also a privacy statement that you would have agreed to there as well. So yes, I will ask our legal representative where we can find that for sure. Good question. All right. You ready?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Aaron will be back. I just want to take a moment before we get into here to just call out Aaron as the leader for SSMS. And you see a lot of things that you've been asking for a long time. And this is because Erin is your inside woman in the company advocating for you, reading your feedback. Some of you have seen her LinkedIn posts. She's been doing Feedback Fridays for a very long time. So if you're happy with SSMS, you should thank Erin. So I'm thanking Erin because it's awesome. I'm also very grateful that I get to go first because their demos are so cool, and Erin's going to do hers live. Mine are recorded. But anyways, I am so stoked about Copilot SSMS. It's a game changer. A little background on me. I am not a DBA. I'm not a SQL expert. So for me and for probably people on your teams that are newer to SQL, this is such an aid, such a thing for learning, such a thing for enhancing my productivity. So let's start by setting it up. All right, so I'm in SSMS 21. I'm connected to a database, and I'm creating a new query. Every time you create a new query, you will hit the Copilot button to kind of enable that experience. The first time you have to give your keys to Azure OpenAI. So that's what I'm doing here. And you'll just auth, and then you won't have to do this again, but you can go into options to update it if you need to. Now, every next time after that for a new query window, you will have to auth like this. I don't know if that's planned for forever. I think so.
It is. It's tied to the editor window. Yeah.
Yeah, so Aaron said it's tied to the editor window. So every time you open a new editor, you will essentially need to re-auth to the Copilot service or Azure OpenAI.
But I'll tell you, if you hate that, if you always want Copilot every time you open an editor, that's the feedback I need to know, right?
Yep, so what she said, yeah, just because you're not mic'd, is she said if you do want it and you don't want to go through this auth process every time, put that in the feedback site. Great. So then you get your window and you can get to running with Copilot. Okay, so personally, I build a lot of demos, I build a lot of examples, and I mentioned we work on the tools team, so I'm always trying to learn things, learn new things about SQL, and so this has been really helpful for me, but I want to take you through something I've actually been using Copilot and SSMS for the past several months, and that's building databases, particularly for demos, but you can see how this might be applicable for designing any new type of database. So here, I've already authed, I'm in Copilot, you can kind of control how big that window is. And basically I'm saying, hey, we're designing a database for a fictional company called Contoso Wireless. They're similar to T-Mobile and Verizon. They sell phones, blah, 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 blah. Can you suggest some tables that will support my app? This app will have a website, you'll create orders, you'll pay bills, etc. Please provide all the scripts and indexes that I need. And it does its thing, man. It's so cool. I don't know what it's doing, but it does it. Then it says, I will validate the scripts. And so this validation thing we'll get to in another demo, but it's really amazing. So it says, hey, you're all good. We've got all this. You'll have the tables you need, the indexes you need. Please take a look first. That's an important caveat. So it tells me these are the suggested schema, and these are the tables that we think you should create. So you can see like the columns look pretty good. It's even doing things like the identity column. It's calling out the primary key. It's using things like date time to get the date, or get date to get the date. It's even doing things like foreign keys, and again, suggesting indexes that we might need. So pretty impressive out the gate. A couple things to remember is like, this is multi-turn. So like Aaron said, it has all the history and it has all the context. So now if I want to like iterate on this, totally iterate on this. If I want to change stuff, I can change stuff. Just so you don't have to see me copying and pasting, I went ahead, so I copied and pasted everything, all the scripts that it told me in. I took a look, they look good to me, but I didn't run this query. I did not create the tables. That's important for this next demo. So then I'm like, hey, this looks great. Do you think that I should have any more indexes or add views to help with performance? Assuming what you know about the scenario. So just come up with the scenario and help me figure out, based on what I said, what I need. And it says, hey, you might need these indexes. And it's also explaining to me what I might need these indexes for. So I could decide, oh, I actually don't want this one. I don't want to do this. These are the views that I might need if I want to get a summary or whatever. And then it's going to give me the scripts to create these additional indexes, and also to create these views. Now, what was really interesting to me is it went through validation a couple times. I couldn't figure out why, but I took a closer look. First, it says, during validation, there's an issue because there are multiple create statements being combined in a single query. They're not using Go or whatever you're supposed to do, I don't know. But they split it up and they said, run them separate. And then they said, okay, let's validate again. There's actually still more errors because the tables we're referencing don't exist because I didn't run the first query that they told me to run to create the tables. So it says, basically you should create these tables and then you should run all these scripts. So it's really helping me. So I said, okay, fine, I'll create the tables. Can you validate again? And it goes through its validation process. And this is really interesting. I was talking to Aaron about this before, about how this thing is able to validate without actually running the query and getting the errors. And Erin can talk more about it when she comes up. But we've built a lot of tools that Copilot can use. So like, for example, it's checking, when it's validating, it's checking that the tables that it's referencing exist. So it can look at the tables that exist without actually having to run the query and see the errors. So pretty cool so far. Are you guys getting any ideas of what you might use this for? You starting to get excited? It's going to get way more exciting. Okay. All right. So I have some tips. So I mentioned this validation thing. If you see it start to spin, because it'll validate and it'll error, like I said, I did this a couple times and it was like, oh, I hit another error, I hit another error. Like read the clues because it's giving you clues like, oh, this create view thing or like the tables don't exist. So like if it's struggling, there's something you can help it with. So this is a two-way kind of thing. So try to understand why and then you can iterate. All right, so now I have my tables, my indexes, my views. What do I want to do next? Okay, so now I want to put data in these tables because this is a demo. Help me put data in the tables. I specified 10 to 100 rows. It's going to go grab the tables, the columns, and it's going to start suggesting data for each of these tables. And you'll see it's like pretty relevant data for the most part, but you can iterate. Again, like I said, you can always go back and forth with this. And we'll see an example of what I'm going to do here. So essentially, it's generating these tables for me. And what I'm going to do is I ran all those queries, and they started erroring. And I said, some of these errors, because it says you suggested explicit value for identity column, please fix it. And it's basically going to go through and be like, oh, it actually says apologies for this oversight. And then it fixes it. And then it all works. And I'm like, great, awesome. Also for the products table, you'll notice here, like these products aren't really realistic. Can you remember my scenario and suggest realistic data? And even I gave it some ideas, like use the Greek alphabet, make sure they're varied, because I don't want it all to be the same product, that won't look real. Change the description so that it looks real, whatever you gotta do, and please suggest 50 rows. And then you can take a look at the rows and we'll kind of zoom this up so you can see it. But it does a pretty good job. So I'm just gonna blindly run it, which is not the advice. Go ahead and run it and we'll take a look at what was created in my products table. And you can see it's done a pretty good job. I said it's a phone company like T-Mobile and Verizon. And so it has different phones, it has different earbuds, screen protectors. I never talked about any of this stuff. Tempered glass, different sizes, different colors, fitness trackers, smartwatches. Even the prices are pretty reasonable. So honestly, I was pretty impressed by this, but I've done a lot with it where, for example, I wanted 10,000 rows. So then I'm like, I actually want 10,000 rows and here's how I want you to vary it. It's amazing. It's very good at generating data. If you're doing demos or you're trying to teach your team things or you're trying to demonstrate things that you can't use your actual data for, this is a great use case, in my opinion. Okay, so I talked about leveraging multi-turns. All right, so I have a couple more things. If you take a look here and you just want to start to get creative. So like if you're looking at this and you're looking at the emails that were generated and the phone numbers and the addresses, you can definitely iterate here. So like, for example, right now all the addresses for some reason came up for Chicago. So I had one version of this where I said, use 50 common city-state combos in the US and make sure the area codes and the zip codes, relate to the cities and the states they're in. It's great. So you can definitely iterate, get creative, and help it. I mean, this is obviously a fake example, but help it help you, right? Okay, so let's take a look. So I'm basically saying, hey, I want this to be a realistic demo, so I want to make sure I'm taking the right security precautions, especially when it comes to data masking. Can you help me identify a strategy? So now what it's doing is, let it finish, but basically it's saying, hey, here are the steps that you should do to implement a data masking strategy. It first lists the steps, and then it starts to go into details about it, and then finally it gives me the scripts to kind of start to apply that strategy as needed. Now I could go back and forth on some of these because maybe I don't want all of them to be masked or maybe I want different ones. But for this case, I'm just gonna run it. And then it says test and validate. Well, it didn't really tell me how to test and validate, and I don't know how. So I just said, can you help me validate and demo this functionality? Maybe I wanna show my team or show my boss that it worked. And so it says, it basically is like, hey, here's how you can validate, but here's how you can test it. So create a non-privileged user. A lot of you are probably familiar with data masking. So create a non-privileged user. So this non-privileged user won't be able to see the masked data. And then run this query and just to test that they can't see it. And sure enough, that data masking works. So yeah, I know that was a lot really fast. And again, like I said, like we're really just getting started. They're gonna blow your mind with some of the heavy SQL stuff you can do here. But like Erin and I have been working on this a lot, and I've been pinging her a lot on how I can use Copilot to help me do my job faster. And it's really a mindset shift, and Erin mentioned this earlier. Like, how can you help Copilot help you, and how can you make it do the work for you? What are the things that you don't want to do that you think you can leverage it for? You don't want to spend time on Google like I usually am. And so now I'll let just you wait. Now I'll let Bob go.
I don't know. I thought it was pretty cool. Good job, Anna. Very nice. I'm not sure I can actually outdo that one, to be honest with you. So Erin, when she was talking to us, she's like, look, I would love for you guys to come up with your own scenarios and things that you're kind of used to and familiar with. So for me, it's a little bit more about administrative type tasks with SQL Server. So I don't have near as many cool demos, I think, as I just saw there, but maybe some more fundamental things that can help and assist you be more productive. So the first thing I wanted to do is just do some fundamentals about backups. So I went and said to myself, okay, can you go and figure out and help me look at my backups? And again, I'm in the context of a database, so it knows what are the backups for this database. It's in that context. So without saying, hey, give me a history, I just said, tell me about my backups. And it gives me actually some pretty detailed information about that, which is things that you could yourself grab from metadata in actual SQL Server itself. But instead of just go figuring out what is that system table to go query or some script you have to do, why not actually go just use a Copilot to go help you do that? So, but then this is interesting. I thought to myself, can it tell me RPO? You could calculate yourself that by looking at this, but it would be nice at any point in time to say, can you do an RPO calculation? And based on my log backup sequence, it says, yeah, I can tell you, you actually have an RPO of like 5 minutes based on your sequence. That's not bad, because sometimes I'm looking and evaluating my system to think, what really is the RPO we're achieving right now with our current backup history? So I love that part of it. And then I thought to myself, all right, Erin told me that this thing doesn't just connect to SQL Server, this connects to Azure. So I'm like, all right, well, how good are you? Can you actually go do this with Azure SQL Database? As you know, Azure SQL Database is automated backup systems. So how do you go get that information? Same question against Azure SQL Database, comes back with the same type of information looking at the automated backup scheme. So now I get some pretty rich information about what are the latest automated backups going on my system in Azure SQL Database. And again, I'm thinking, okay, well, can you tell me, after looking at these details, what also is the RPO for that scenario? Because I'd like to know in the case of Azure what is actually happening. So I'm like, okay, tell me the RPO based on my current automated backups. It comes up and says, sure, I can tell you that. Based on what I see is the sequence of the automated schedule that's happening, you got about a 15-minute window using backups if you're going to use that as the RPO mechanism. So those seem kind of fundamental scenarios you yourself as administrators might be doing, but it's nice to have just a conversation with this Copilot to quickly go get that information without having to go search within different types of system metadata. So that was just one scenario I looked at for backups. And I thought, okay, what could be another scenario? Well, nobody cares about statistics, right? So here I go. As you know, the Cowboys are the best. So looking at a table here, it's not right. I did this demo before, right? Actually, when we were doing better. So looking at that kind of type table, I'm thinking to myself, with those coming in rows, are my stats out of date for this table? Just by asking this question. Again, it knows about SQL Server itself, so it can go in and say, look, I actually do think that you might have a problem where statistics are out of date for your table. And in terms of this particular case, I don't have auto update stats on. I'm relying on manual stats in my environment, which I've seen many customers do that. So it says, yeah, it turns out by looking in the behind in your system, I think it could be out of date. So it just gives me a quick update statistics statement to run. I realize that that's an area right there that I'm blindly doing this because it's kind of a small data set. That might be something you just want to go kick off. But it did do that, and then like Anna had done, I'm like, hey, can you just go back and check it again to make sure things are working correctly? And it's like, yeah. By going back and looking at this, I can tell that stats were updated correctly. A little simple scenario for looking at like maybe an auto update stat scenario. So again, I'm thinking a little bit more about what do I do next. And I did a session just recently and kind of sprinted over here on inside transaction logging. So I'm liking, does this thing understand how things happen when logs can't be truncated? So I've got a database here where I crafted a specific scenario where I knew in my mind, because I crafted it, there'd be a problem with logging. First of all, I said, what is just the size of the log itself? Like, can you just give me some basic information about logs? And it says, okay, I can tell you your log is this current size. But I'm like, hey, it won't truncate. It's a 4 gig and it won't get any slower. So we can easily go in and look at things like log reuse weights and tell me, yeah, the problem is that you haven't done a log backup. So easily I can know that this log is out of control or growing because of the fact that I haven't done one. So let me go do a backup. Maybe you've been in this scenario before where you've gone and backed up your own transaction log. Like, sure, okay, fine. I didn't do a log backup correctly. Let me go do that. I'm like, okay, what is my log space now after doing that? And it's like, well, I can look at your log space, and it's still like 99%. I'm like, what the heck? Why is this thing still, in this kind of state of doing? Hey, I can't trunk up my log. Can you check it again? It's like, well, there's several things I could go look at right here based on known types of common problems that can occur for log truncation. You know what? I found an active transaction. So it already went and knew that as part of that sequence, if you already backed to the log, that must not be it. It must be an active transaction. Sure enough, I do. So I had one out there. I commit this transaction. I can go do that, come back and look at it again and say, great, can you tell me what my log space looks like now? I don't know about you, but if you run this situation yourself and you're trying to struggling with these log space scenarios where log is growing out of control, pretty simple way of me finding some common problems, both with cases where I was not backing up a full recovery database, but also perhaps an active transaction not allowing me to truncate the log. So pretty fundamental situations that I'm running into. And again, I went ahead and backed up the log at that point, now that I've committed that transaction, and came back and said, can you show me what the log size is now? Comes back and says, yeah, that log is still pretty large, but you've gotten rid of that space. So potentially I could go a process if I need to go shrink my database at this point, shrink my log at this point because of that log control. So that's pretty cool. I'm running some common admin scenarios. And I was talking to Aaron and Ken Van Heijn, who's working in this tool, and they're like, Bob, we would love you to look at what's called our audit feature. I'm like, your audit feature? Like, no, like a health audit, like a health check. I'm like, okay, I'll try it. So I came in and I said, like, fine, can you just go check and check the health of my SQL Server instance? What it does do, it goes through a series now of what like is a report. It's going to produce this very detailed health audit report of looking at things like instant configuration settings, things like perhaps like my max server memory settings. It could look and see like, hey, your max DOP is a certain level. Here's the nodes and how many different schedulers on your system. You don't have a cumulative update installed, by the way, FYI. Good job there. Here's your max server memory setting. You might consider changing that to a lower value based on what's going in your system with locked pages. Oh, by the way, here's an unhealthy database because of one you were working on that you had this log out of control problem. It even looks at security problems. Whoops, I enabled SA. That was a problem there. At least it caught that one, right? And gives me other information that I might have some high privilege accounts that maybe I need to go take a look at. So another option to look at the overall settings for security. And then kind of has this, let me show you some other information about the fact that you don't have backups for this database, you don't have HA configured for your system, and then kind of a conclusion. I thought that was pretty cool. And Aaron goes, have you tried the Markdown feature? I'm like, I love Markdown. Are you serious? So I exported to Markdown, went in Visual Studio Code, and did a little preview, and now I've got a report. So I can now take Markdown type files as reports, share that with my team, even potentially, I would think, take Markdowns from any of these scenarios, maybe and use Git as a certain situation to go, hey, I've got a certain set of changes I made in my system. I'm going to go do a health check, take the Markdown, stick that in with the scripts to kind of keep track of a history of configuration changes I'm making in my system, and what does the system observe about those changes? So pretty cool. Looked at backups for SQL Server, looked at backups for Azure SQL Database, was able to get RPOs from both systems, looked at a basic scenario with out-of-date statistics, even looked at a scenario where log truncation was troubling me, and then able to look at a health audit overall for my system to see maybe there's some configuration things I should take a look at against best practices. So I don't know, Anna, Aaron, if that was as cool as what you guys just did, but yeah. Aaron, I think maybe you should come back here, and should we stop for a second and take questions, or you want to do your live thing?
We can take questions.
Okay, we can take questions. Right there. Like a query performance problem. So I've tried that before with query performance. It can actually look at things like query store and look at query performance. I would say that is one area that I know the team, I want them to work more on that. I spent a lot of time in query performance issues myself. We've got our Azure Copilot that is really good about narrowing those down. I think there's some work for the team to do here, but I think the intention is to get it right to that state, to do the same kind of things, yeah.
It is. It's going to take time. In the keynote today, or in the blog post, I think I said that we start with general SQL questions. And troubleshooting performance, some of you in here have spent most of your careers troubleshooting performance, right? And that is an art and a science. And figuring out how to put all of that into Copilot is really fun for me, but it's also not easy. So as an example, why is my database slow is a demo that Bob
That's what
has
I do all the time, yeah.
done a lot for Azure. And so I was like, well, let me see what happens here. Now I have a workload running. You can see all these scripts that are going down here. My CPU is really unhappy. And so it gives me some examples like here's why it could be. And then it says here are the things that you should look for. And then it tells me here are the top 5 currently running queries by CPU time. Like I know where I would start and what I wanted to do. And so we're not there yet, but we will get there. Like that's, I think, one of the things that people ask for the most, for sure.
Yeah, right here.
Will this Copilot experience also work with Synapse Analytics or the SQL endpoints in Fabric?
That's a great question. Will it also work with Synapse Analytics and the endpoints within Fabric? Fabric is working on their own Copilot. And right now, I don't want to duplicate work, and I don't want to cross streams. So they're kind of working in their space, and we're working in this space right now. So if you try and use it against DW, I'll be honest, it bombs. It's not pretty. So you can try, but I wouldn't.
Only native SQL endpoints right now.
Right.
Azure SQL or SQL Server.
Right.
So
Yep.
right there.
Is the Copilot only relevant to the instance you're connected to? If you're connected to multiple instances, you could run a query or run a Copilot question against all your instances you're connected to.
Right, so the question is, what does it have for context, right? So right now, in your demos, in both of your demos, right? Like when we're connected to SQL Server on-prem, right now, where we're starting, again, we're starting over here and there's all of this, right? So we're starting in the editor specifically because that's where I know most people spend their time. And so it has the context of your connection and it knows what database you're connected to. And so that's really where it starts. So if you're connected to SQL Server 2022, you can ask it more questions about the instance, but you can't have it go look at your estate. Now, if you are ARC enabled and maybe you want to do something there, that's a great space for us to go into. That's probably like over here.
No, the team is looking at ARC. We are looking at Copilots for ARC connected servers across the states, that's for sure. It's not there yet, though. Right there.
Is there any thought into, if I'm asking the question in the background, it's running some usually harmless DMV, but it has a junior DB, I say, hey, give me the fragmentation of this 7 terabytes.
It's a great example.
It logs everything.
I actually, we have such great engineers. There's a whole system that they've been developing for testing everything in Copilot. And so part of my request is, okay, we're going to be throwing these scenarios at Copilot and then seeing what it does. So I want us to run extended events against what it's doing because I want to trace the queries that Copilot is running. So fundamentally, when something is run by Copilot, there's actually, it has its own connection and it says like Management Studio Copilot or something like that. So one, you could filter on those, right? You could run an XD session to look at that. And fragmentation is is one that I've already thought about. There's a fine line though, because we can't know that you just asked us to run a query against a table that isn't indexed and has 10 billion rows, right?
Ahead of time.
Right, ahead of time, right? So I don't have a great answer to that type of a scenario, but for something like the DMVs, there are things that yes, we will do to kind of preempt that.
So we've been very patient, way in the back of the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, just real quick, this relates to Aaron's presentation, probably more than anything. But as I saw the tables getting built in our example, I have a couple of issues with the naming convention. And since Copilot is contextual,
Yep.
is it able to ingest your name while it produces these things for you?
So the question is, like, when I'm using wide world importers, orders, order lines, products, right? All of those are very obvious, and it did that for Anna as well when it created her tables, right, with very obvious names. You all don't have obvious names, right? Somebody might have an orders table that's just ORD or products table that's just PRD. And we're not there yet, but that's another thing that I've challenged the data scientists and the engineers on. How do we do that? Because I've gotten this question already, right? My schema, I want it to know what my schema is, and I don't want to have to give it that information every single time I hop into Copilot. And so my quick question to you, by a show of hands, in order for us to persist that type of information, I have to put it somewhere, right? Because you really want to use it across your entire organization. So do you want it? Let me give you your options first. Do you want it in that user database, in your user database? Or do you want it in a different database?
Like Purview or something.
Right. So who would want it like in that same user database? Raise your hands. Ah. That's a different question. who would want it not in that database, but somewhere else? Some of you didn't raise your hands because you're like, I don't know yet. That's totally
Would you-
fine.
So additionally,
Totally fine.
if you did it in your database, would you use extended properties that already exist in SQL Server for this?
Do any of you use extended properties? Oh, you're my favorite. Okay.
Okay, we're looking at that option. So,
Yeah.
so let me do this. Let me let Aaron go a little bit further here, and we'll see if we have time for last questions at the end. Is that fair?
Yeah,
Just-
I really don't know what I want to show. I just was kind of like, let me come up here and wing it.
Oh,
so,
okay.
So I'm going to ask a question.
Okay.
Is there anybody who's thought of a scenario that like, or something that you'd want to ask beyond just like, list all my indexes in the database? Because, hold on, let me come back to my slides for 1 second. Our slides, where are they? Here. One of my things, do not, please, for your own sanity, please do not treat the sidecar chat like the query editor results grid, right? Like, I understand that you're like, I want to see what it can do. List all my indexes. If you have 1,000 indexes, like, that's just not going to go well. So it doesn't know, right, how much data it's going to return. So there is some judgment that comes in here, okay? So, all right, let's be bold. Now, this could fail horribly.
So does the co-pilot will able to read the execution plan if I'm
Ah.
doing that and then read it?
So will it be able to read the execution plan? It can't currently, and here's an interesting problem. If I'm going to send the XML for the execution plan, how many of you have had execution plans that are a couple megs in size, right? We have to send all of that text along with the prompt, and there's a whole token limit in
We're
there.
gonna get token limit problem.
So that's an interesting problem for us to solve. I want us to be able to do that, right? I want us to be able to say, tell me what's wrong with this execution plan. But there's several problems that we have to solve first. But who has a question that they would want to ask?
Could you analyze what the bottlenecks are in a long-running backup?
What the what?
What the bottlenecks are?
What the bottleneck is in a long-running backup.
Backup, and would you suggest any changes to the parameters that you pass in?
Ah, okay. I haven't tried that, and I can't test that easily right now. But that's a nice scenario. Okay. Yes.
I want to restore script because I want to restore all my databases back to 8:13 p.m. last night.
A point-in-time restore?
Point in time restore, and I wanted to generate the script for me for all 350 databases because we had a problem with the server.
And can you do that right
That's never happened, right? That's never really happened.
I'm sure it knows how to do a point-in-time restore generally script. I bet it can do that.
Right. So I also don't know that I set any of these up right. Like, to be fair, like I haven't run a lot of that. So let me see what it does here. Okay, so let me come back up. So it says here, right, to generate this, we need to do the following steps, right? Identify the list, determine the backup files, generate this. We're looking at some different remote modes, by the way, right? So I'm going to give you this script. Here is the script to generate this for all backups. So it generates the script for me to then generate the scripts, right? So if I copy this
That's not
out, right, and
That's not bad.
do this, for those of you that love T-SQL, right, so it's using a cursor, which there's a time and a place for cursors, right, where it's going to look at restoring the database, restoring the log. I don't know, I'll run this and see what happens. Oh, so this is a great example, right? So it's like, there's a problem. So when it gives you a script and there's a problem with that, all you have to do is like just pop that back in there and tell it to go.
On the error.
And basically, now remember, we're in private preview. Okay.
It didn't say I apologize?
It didn't say apologize. It didn't say apologize.
I need to teach you to use 4HDB with that scenario, by the
Yeah.
way, instead of a cursor.
So it should get you there, right? And then you can iterate with that. Like, no, I need you to do this. Like, as Anna was saying, like work, kind of educate it, teach it a little bit more as you go along.
So as we're finishing, though, I do have a couple of questions. You can just kind of just raise your hand and ask. So you picked a couple of scenarios. Think of just one scenario today that you run into. The restore was one of them. Like, what's a scenario today that you're really challenged by that you're saying this could actually make me faster? That you'd like to see it do, based on all the things we just talked about.
Can it read the log?
Can it read the log?
Oh,
What
like
do you mean by-
FNDB log?
Like the error log?
No, which one?
Logins. Show me logins.
Show me logins in my system? I'm sorry.
Like failed
Okay.
logins? Well, I have to be auditing the logins, right? So.
Oh, but like from the error log, you're saying? Okay. So can it just, first of all, can it just analyze things in the error log? Is that your question? Okay. You had one?
Can it remind me where the checkbox is to prevent saving changes that recrease the table? Always.
So you want to give an SSMS tip, is what you're saying? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Test data?
That's what Anna did, yeah.
And I think
was
did a
great.
good job of that
Yeah.
one, actually, yeah. So,
for sure.
yeah.
What
An
was that?
availability group scenario. Help me diagnose an availability group problem. Yeah.
Can you read through default trace as well and find out who did, somebody did something?
A default SQL trace? Or like X events in general? Like can it look at X event data, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Way in the back. Yeah.
Show me all of my head blockers for blocking.
Show a blocking chain, lead blockers. And then if you had that, would it be okay if you had to do a multi-turn to say, is there an open transaction, or you want all that just in one shot?
Well, head blocker is one shot, and then maybe follow up to show you the blocking chain.
Show me the blocking chain? Okay. Yeah.
Okay, for me would be, can you help me identify all of the legacy code that exists that's using link servers?
So how do you know? So you'd have to define legacy, right? Like those are really great questions. But like if you asked Bob legacy code and then you asked Anna about legacy code, right? You would get two very different answers, right? Nothing against Anna. Okay.
Because I was using it before she was born. that's
Right,
why.
right. Same thing for Copilot. So like you have to tell it what legacy
But it's
is.
interesting, though, to know what, see, sometimes language models try to take those words and try to figure it out. It would be interesting to see what it thinks that
It
is.
would.
Based on, like,
It
for
would.
example, what's current supported SQL or something,
But like
right?
actually, to the demo that Bob had earlier about stats, you had recorded it before I asked Ken to make a change. So
Yeah, there's a change to that, actually make it better.
Ken showed me the output, and I was like, I don't like that because
Yeah.
I love stats, right? And so I changed it. So if I say list out of date statistics, what it should do is it should ask me to help it understand what I think is out of date. And so when we're talking about legacy, that to me is the same kind of thing. Like what are you defining as legacy code? Now, I might have really ticked it off here at this point, so it might not come back with it. I don't know. So here,
Oh, let's try it. Here we go.
this is the answer that I wanted. So it says, to list them, what do you need to think about, right? So what do you, because this is the same question that I would ask, right? What do you consider out of date, right? Do you want to consider them out of date based on a percentage of rows or an absolute number of rows, right? And do you want a specific table set, everything, or do you care about the number of rows? Now, for some folks, they would be like, I'm out. Like, Anna might be like, I don't care, just give me the ones that are out of date, right? So, and you can do that, right? You could be like, I don't care, just tell me what's not current, right? And it will give you an answer. But I can also go in there and say, give me the stats that are have more than 5% change that haven't been updated in over a week for tables with more than 100,000 rows, right? And then
Prompt engineering.
yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. No, I mean, have you seen me teach about AI? Prompt engineering is all about trying to actually create a better, more refined prompt to get a better response instead of something vague and have to do multi-turns. So, do you have any more content, or just you
I
want
don't
to give
know.
the resources at the end here?
Yeah,
or-
what was I going to do? Do I have any more content?
What was I going to do?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Why don't we got about 3 minutes, so let's go ahead and cover
Right,
that.
so just a reminder that chat history is part of your prompts until you clear it. So we're sending that conversation, which is how you can do the multi-turn, right? Because you're asking and it's giving you a query, and then when I throw the error in there and I'm like, fix it, right? It knows what query it sent, so then it's like, oh, here's the error, let me go ahead and change that. But you can clear that history to basically start over. And then the other thing is that you can also tell it if you want the output in a certain format. So you can say, I want it in a table, I want it in a list, like to help you, right? Help it help you, as we've said. Throwing this up here about the feedback site again, right? I know that slide's in here twice, that's on purpose. Please go, I need the feedback here. I'm happy to talk to
When
you.
you start using Copilot, or this is private?
This is in
preview?
general. Like
Okay.
in general, when you start using that, but when you get 21, like in both cases, this is still where I need to go to find out what everybody wants to see. So make sure you filter on tooling, check that. Now the roadmap. Before I go to the roadmap, I posted something on LinkedIn and somebody was like, what's for SSMS 22? And I was like, Ritzy, we gotta ship 21 first, okay? So when I'm talking about the roadmap right now, I'm really saying like, where are we going like with this 21 journey? And so there will be multiple previews. Again, there is work that we have to finish related to the login and the user experience for Azure SQL Database, the auth experience, the connection experience, ARM64 support. Go through Dark Theme. There's a lot of documentation that we need to be updating. And then a public preview for Copilot and SSMS. And we probably won't. I said we will not because I just want to set expectations. I would rather underpromise and overdeliver. So I don't think that we'll finish all of that by GA, and I'm okay with that because quite frankly, I think that we're going in a very good direction. I understand that sometimes maybe we aren't moving as fast as everyone would like. But again, we're trying to make sure that we're deliberate in what we're doing, both in Copilot and in 21, so that we're giving you an application that you will continue to love, that looks familiar, is stable, and reliable. So.
Do you have what's the sign up for the private preview? Do we have that? We even have a sign up yet for that? Or?
It is aka.ms/SSMS interest. I think it's that, SSMS interest. So
You've
aka.
blogged about this. You posted this publicly.
It is on, yes, it's on the blog post that I posted today.
Awesome.
Anna's going to try it right now to confirm.
Anna, Aaron,
Bob?
really, really good job today. Thank you so much for teaching I Need a Copilot. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Appreciate
all.
it. Thank you.